It's already bad enough that we're ruled by corrupt, authoritarian, fascist, billionaire PDF files, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. But to make matters worse, there's a faction of religious extremists within the Trump regime who think that they're actualizing biblical end times prophecy by doing the bidding of Israel. Yeah, and they also think that war with Iran is going to help usher in the Armageddon. In fact, influential Christian Zionists like Pastor John Hagee are telling their congregations that Trump's war with Iran is actually part of God's plan, and that God is going to militarily assist Israel if Christians pray hard enough, and if Israel prevails in the end, it'll subsequently lead to a righteous revival in the United States. And Israel's imperial conquest is important to fundamentalists like John Hagee because, as journalist Meta points out, Hagee believes Israel has a right to take over much of the Middle East, which is why he and ally Mike Huckabee have been avid supporters of the genocide in Gaza. Hagee believes that Israel's success will hasten end-time prophecies and bring on the second coming of Christ and eventually lead to everyone converting to Christianity, or else. It's why his group, Christians United for Israel, is even larger than the more well-known pro-Israel lobbying group AIPAC. And to elaborate on the or else that Meta was referring to, it means that everybody has to convert or be killed, including all Jews. So the core belief of Christian Zionists is deeply anti-Semitic. They only want Israel to control all of the Middle East so that way Jesus can come back and send everyone to hell if they don't convert to Christianity. And Israeli leaders like Netanyahu are well aware of this fact, but they don't care, seeing as how deranged Christian Zionists are helping them achieve their own Zionist expansionism. But this belief isn't some conspiracy theory. This is what they actually believe. I was taught the same thing as a fundamentalist myself when I was a kid, and U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee actually admitted such in a recent interview with Tucker Carlson.
You've appealed to Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram, it's pre-Abraham, it's Abram, receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land. And you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think that's right. And that would include like basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant, so that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be,
I'm not sure it would go that far. I mean, it would be a big piece of land, but here's the point.
It would be a lot of places that are now countries.
But this particular area that we're talking about now, Israel, is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism, I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis. You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
And again, he's fine with Israel taking over all of the Middle East because Jesus can't come back until that happens. But this extreme fundamentalism is so much more prevalent in the Trump regime than I think anyone realized. And journalist Jonathan Larsen reports that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has essentially turned the U.S. military into a vehicle for this kind of Christian Zionist end times prophecies. He reports Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has enshrined evangelical Christianity at the uppermost levels of the U.S. military, airing monthly prayer meetings throughout the Pentagon. Last year, the Pentagon confirmed to me that Hegseth attends a weekly White House Bible study. It's led by a preacher who says God commands America to support Israel. Now, here's the result of that. A combat unit commander told non-commissioned officers at a briefing Monday that the Iran war is actually part of God's plan and that President Donald Trump was anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause the Armageddon and mark his return to Earth, according to a complaint by a non-commissioned officer. From Saturday morning through Monday night, more than 110 similar complaints about commanders in every branch by the military had been logged by the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. The complaints came from more than 40 different units spread across at least 30 military installations, the MRFF told me Monday night. The non-commissions officer who filed the complaint said their commander urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan, and he specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelation referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus Christ. So these are the kinds of commanders who are in charge of the military at a time when the country is invading Iran. That's really bleak to hear, right? Now, Larsen goes on to explain that the Military Religious Freedom Foundation has been inundated with complaints about religious liberty violations since the U.S. and Israel invaded Iran, because military commanders are basically creaming in their pants at the opportunity to now bring about the end times prophecy. And that is not hyperbole. It feels like I'm being uncharitable when I say that, but I'm not. The Military Religious Freedom Foundation said that across most of the complaints that they're receiving, troops are describing their commanders as having unrestrained euphoria over what they see as a biblically sanctioned war. So they are ecstatic that the U.S. is bombing Iran. They genuinely believe that Trump has a divine mandate to bomb another country. And commanders are pushing this religious extremism on their units because if Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is able to break code and violate religious liberty of troops that, he's in charge of and commanders and whatnot, then why can't they? Like, everything kind of rolls downhill from the top. If he does it, they feel like they're going to do it too. And much like Huckabee, Hegseth has the exact same views about Israel. And during Trump's first administration, Hegseth actually talked about how Trump was a vehicle for God's divine will for Israel in a way that should alarm every single person.
Jennifer and I and others had a chance to go see the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, the Western Wall tunnels, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle, 1948 was a miracle, 1967 was a miracle, 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle, and there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. I don't know how it would happen. You don't know how it would happen, but I know that it could happen. That's all I know. And a step in that process, a step in every process, is the recognition that facts and activities on the ground truly matter. And that's why going and visiting Judea and Samaria, understanding that sovereignty, the very sovereignty of Israeli soil, Israeli cities, locations, is a critical next step to showing the world that this is the land for Jews and the land of Israel. And I believe, as was mentioned, he said you need to, what was mentioned is you need to buy the ticket. Don't just wish for 40 years to win the lottery, buy the ticket. I would submit to you, in light of the support you have in Washington, D.C., the support you have amongst patriotic Americans, amongst evangelical Christians, amongst believers, amongst Republicans, even amongst some Democrats who can barely say it anymore in Washington. Buy the ticket, take your action, do what needs to be done here in Israel, because I truly believe this is a moment where America will have your back. You have Donald Trump in the White House, you have Mike Pence as vice president, you have Nikki Haley at the UN, you have true believers in Israel and America that have your back.
And that guy is now our defense secretary. So he went to Israel and he told them to take over the West Bank, and he referred to the 1917 Balfour Declaration and the 1948 Nakba as miracles, and explicitly said that Israel will have the United States' support if they annex the West Bank. Fast forward to today, and that's exactly what Israel is doing. And Trump is letting it happen. Not because Trump subscribes to their loony religious views, but because a billionaire mega donor, Miriam Adelson, cut him a check for $100 million on the condition that he lets Israel annex the entire West Bank. But the fundamentalists are interpreting that corruption as Trump carrying out the will of God, when he's simply just doing the bidding of his donors who support Israel's imperialism. But the Christian Zionist fascists genuinely believe that all of the stars are aligning right now for Jesus to come back. It's not just that Israel is taking over the West Bank, which is what they've long wanted. It's that Israel's enemies are also being vanquished, Iran. And because they think that biblical prophecy is coming to fruition, they're now really letting their freak flags fly, because why wouldn't they? If Jesus is about to come back, then the rules of engagement and the codes of conduct prohibiting commanders from pushing religion on their units are null and void, because God's law is finally usurping U.S. law and the Constitution. And I want to be very clear, it's not just that the religious freedom of U.S. service members is being violated. That would be a problem in and of itself. It's that this religious extremism is having a concrete effect on the battlefield. And this is the most chilling part of the story. So the Military Religious Freedom Foundation told Jonathan Larsen, quote, many of their commanders are especially delighted with how graphic this battle will be, zeroing in on how bloody all of this must become in order to fulfill and be in 100% accordance with fundamentalist Christian end of the world eschatology. So they want the war to be bloody, because if it's not bloody enough, Jesus won't come back. Like, this is the level of delusion we are dealing with in this fucking country. And the war has already been incredibly bloody. The U.S. and Israel killed 175 girls in a school bombing. And there are reports that Tehran is being carpet bombed. They are already committing war crimes, and it just began. And this is exactly what needs to happen for Jesus to come back. Now, let me just remind you who it was again that explicitly announced that they would not abide by the rules of engagement.
No stupid rules of engagement.
That's right, it was that guy, the same guy who believes that the war has to be bloody for the biblical prophecy to be fulfilled. In other words, they think they have to commit war crimes for Jesus. If this were a Muslim, the U.S. government would declare him a terrorist. But since he's a Christian Zio-Nazi, it's barely a blip on anyone's radar. So regardless if, this war is being waged for religious reasons or due to Trump's corruption, part of the reason why we are at war with Iran, make no mistake about it, is because of Israel. And Trump isn't willing to admit this yet, but make no mistake about it, that is the fucking reason why we're at war with Iran.
Mr. President, did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And we have great negotiators, great people that do this very successfully and have done it all their lives very successful. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand.
Sure you did. It's not that you were paid by the Israel lobby to do their bidding, or that Netanyahu made you think it was your idea, or that maybe he forced you to do it because your former bestie, Jeffrey Epstein, was an Israeli intelligence asset who maybe gave the Israeli government information to blackmail you with. I mean, if that were the case, Trump wouldn't be the first American president blackmailed by Netanyahu after all. You sincerely thought that an attack was imminent, even though your Pentagon said that that was not the case. Sure. But the good news is that we don't have to speculate, because Marco Rubio confirmed that it was, in fact, Israel that goaded the U.S. into this war with Iran the second time in the span of a year. Nick Turse of The Intercept reports that Rubio essentially admitted that we're essentially fighting Israel's war. Quote, he explained that the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had effectively boxed in the Trump administration, taking the decision out of American hands. Quote, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action, Rubio explained. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. So rather than telling our own vassal state, no, you're not allowed to do this, the Trump regime opted to just go along with what Israel wants. Again, because that's what the Israel lobby paid him to do. It was money well spent. And when you take into account all of the fundamentalist freaks that are in his ear telling him war with Iran is essential, it's no surprise to see that this was the outcome. And to be clear, I don't think that the Christian Zionists in his regime are telling him that he should attack Iran to usher in the end times because he doesn't subscribe to that philosophy. I think that they're probably telling him that, if he does this, he's going to be viewed as this courageous and brave leader. But keep in mind, it's not just the Israel lobby and Christian Zionists here. It's also the neocon establishment that's being bankrolled by the defense industry that also wanted Trump to do this. So when you have so many amoral merchants of death and religious extremists pushing for war with Iran, this is the end result. It's always going to be the end result. The warmongers get what they want, and people opposed to war, innocent people who don't want to be killed, they don't get what they want. But out of all of the warmongers, I've got to admit, I am the most concerned about the religious fundamentalists, because if you unironically believe that you're carrying out the will of God, then literally nothing else matters. Not laws, not the Constitution, not poll numbers, not approval ratings, not money. Nothing but prophecy matters, because God's will is more powerful than all of that in your mind. So I think that we should all be concerned that religious lunatics have infiltrated our government at the highest levels. And if people like Pete Hegseth think that we have to wage war and we have to commit war crimes against, people in Iran for Jesus, then he should be stripped of his power immediately and placed in a fucking straitjacket before he gets more people killed, because that is not acceptable. You're free to believe what you want, but when you have power and your religious fundamentalism dictates what you do while you're in power, that's a different story. That's where we say, no, you don't get to do this. At least a sane society would say you don't get to do this. But since this is the United States of America and we don't hold anyone accountable, even when they murder and commit acts of pedophilia, then he's going to do it. And I guess that we're just supposed to sit back and take it. Well, I say to hell with that. I say we need a general strike, shut down this entire fucking economy until everyone from the Trump regime is out of power, because this cannot be tolerated. The things that they are doing are not acceptable. And I feel like I'm screaming into the void because everybody who's watching this already knows that. But until the rest of America wakes up and understands the threat that is posed by this extremist regime, then nothing is going to change. Like, until it becomes so disruptive that Americans cannot go on with their daily lives, they're just not going to wake up. It has to affect them personally. So it might have to get worse before it gets better. I hope that's not the case. But I just think that people should automatically think it's bad that religious extremists are using the U.S. military as a vehicle to bring about the Armageddon. I think that's objectively bad, and every single person should be concerned about that.